Hi, my name is David P Shapiro. I'm the owner and managing partner of the law office of David P Shapiro, located in San Diego, California, where my firm helps good people regain control of their future when charged with a crime. And in this video, I want to talk about the verdict that came down in Minnesota just right before the holiday break. I think it was the day before Christmas Eve, regarding former officer Kimberly Potter, who was convicted of both first-degree and second-degree manslaughter in the state of Minnesota for the killing of Dante Wright. And this is a case that was going on, right on the heels of the George Floyd killing and what would eventually be the conviction of Derek Chavin for the murder of George Floyd. But this case was very different for a number of reasons. But the bottom line is there was a loss of life that could have and should have been prevented, although probably with different motives. And this was a situation with Ms. Potter involving more about criminal negligence and more about the misuse of a firearm. What was surprising coming in was when Minnesota decided to upgrade the charges to first-degree manslaughter. A lot of people thought that was an overreach, myself included, but ultimately the jury disagreed and they convicted Ms. Potter of both first-degree manslaughter, which under the theory of that she recklessly used a firearm, as well as second-degree manslaughter under the theory of culpable negligence. Now, what does that really mean, and why did the jury come to that conclusion? Well, there's a lot of factors that go into it. And what we're dealing with here with Officer Potter was this is a woman who had 26 years so on of experience, who was a training officer. She knew better. She should have known the difference between where her taser was and where her firearm was, what it felt like, on what side of her body it was on. And also what we know is she's screaming, taser, 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 a couple of times before ultimately pulling out the gun and shooting him. So significant degree of negligence resulted in the killing of Dante Wright. But what was a very interesting defense argument was the fact that when the shot was fired, could Officer Potter, then Officer Potter, have used lethal force because another officer was in the vehicle, reaching in the vehicle when Dante Wright attempted to flee. Basically, the theory being, well, he was potentially could have risked that officer's life and was using lethal force against that officer, or potentially using lethal force against that officer. So even if she intended to shoot Dante Wright with a firearm, would that have been legally justified? Jury disagreed, but it was a pretty novel argument. But I think they crossed the line, they being the defense, when you're talking about victim blaming or victim shaming, talking about how Dante Wright is responsible for his own death. I don't think they should have gone that far. I think they could have made their point more effectively without necessarily shaming the decedent in this case. One other factor that goes into it is sort of her admission or her own acceptance of guilt or wrongdoing. Not only just saying, oh my God, it was a very emotional, reaction that so many of us saw on the body-worn camera, and understandably so, when she realized that she actually shot a man when she thought she was tasing him. But what was really interesting was the fact that sooner after, I'm going to prison. Oh my God, I'm going to prison. I'm going to prison. Sort of acknowledging the fact that she had committed a crime, or believed that she would be found criminally liable. So that was really telling in what ultimately came out when the jury returned their verdicts after a couple of days. I think it was somewhere around 22 hours of deliberation. Now, what's also interesting is what is going to be the sentence for Kimberly Potter when she's sentenced later in 2022. And Minnesota works with the guidelines. How it is basically the maximum sentence that she could get for first-degree manslaughter is up to 15 years in prison. The maximum for second-degree manslaughter would be 10 years. Now, Minnesota's kind of strange, not like California where you could sort of stack on these sentences. So technically she's facing 25 years. Realistically, the top charge, the first-degree manslaughter, she could get up to 15. Would be somewhere in the realm of 7 years, but what may be asked to file a motion for aggravating factors similar to what we saw in where they would be asking the court to deviate above and beyond what the guideline range calls for. So we expect the Attorney General, the prosecutors in Minnesota, to be asking for more than 7 years for Kimberly Potter. Now, are they doing that because that's what they really believe is appropriate, or are they doing that because they believe that the defense has some really strong arguments why this should be below 7 years, and maybe they just want to get them back up or get the judge back up to that presumptive 7-year prison term? But what was also very interesting was how the judge went about taking Ms. Potter into custody even before entertaining the argument from her defense attorneys, as we saw. And I think Ms. Potter knew, you could see when the verdicts were being read, she's taking off what appeared to be a chain with a medallion, understanding that she was going into custody. So something she was certainly prepared for, and it'll be interesting to see what the sentence is, because unlike with Chauvin, where anyone and everyone was totally disgusted by him and his actions and everything we saw, and here we have a situation where a woman was severely shaken up by what had occurred, albeit through her own negligence, but severely shaken up, emotionally charged, emotionally, repentant for what she had done, and felt terrible about it, where we didn't necessarily hear that from Chauvin in that here at the turn of 21. Keep an eye on this case. We'll be keeping an eye on this case, obviously in Minnesota, to see where the sentencing lies as it relates to the manslaughter conviction for the murder or for the killing of Dante Wright. So we'll keep an eye on it. I'm sure you will as well. If you have any questions about manslaughter in San Diego, feel free to reach out and give my firm a call, 619-295-3555. Again, David Shapiro, San Diego criminal defense attorney, 619-295-3555.